Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Ranier Zitelmannn. His last name is spelled Zitelmann, and he comes to us from Germany. This will be our second episode. We did one early last year. We talked about his book about the origins of poverty and wealth. And a new book came to my attention that he published a new book. So if you're watching this on my 3 YouTube channels, if you're watching it on X, Rumble, or now Substack is where I'm posting to right now, you'll see the title of the book. And he can explain how timely this is. Like this interview, the date is really something else. But it is, the full title is New Space Capitalism, the Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. So you can check it out. It is out now. And it has a foreword by Newt Gingrich, if you know American politics. He's done an interesting intro, but it's an interesting story because it's kind of a historical story. He talks about his past life and his interest in space travel and really how things have progressed since the 60s. So there's a lot here to talk about. He has a very auspicious and lengthy curriculum vitae or resume. He has 2 doctorates. So he has one in sociology and then another in
history.
His doctorate under von Areten. His thesis was Hitler's social and economic worldview. He's awarded summa cum laude. But he's also authored and edited 32 books. So a lot of different stuff and published in a lot of periodicals that you would know. Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, Forbes, Daily Telegraph, The Times, Le Monde, Corriere della Sera, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, Der Spiegel, Neue Zürcher Zeitung, and all over the world, really. And he sent me a couple of his articles too. But we're primarily going to talk about this book, New Space Capitalism, the Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. So Ranier Zitelmannn, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me again.
For people who may not have heard our earlier show, I'll put a link to our earlier show in the show notes. Maybe you can add to kind of the bio I introduced you with, and then maybe you can talk about the formulation and writing of this new book, New Space Capitalism. Still there?
Yes.
Okay. Well, do you want to talk about the book, this book, New Space Capitalism?
Yes, sure. Tomorrow, as you mentioned, is a really important day because it's the SpaceX IPO. They want to raise $75 billion. This is by far the biggest IPO in the history. But not only this, tomorrow we will see, I think, the first trillionaire in the history of mankind, Elon Musk. And it's a little bit of funny for me because when I started to write articles about space capitalism and when I started with a book, there were, to be honest, a lot of people who laughed at me. Space capitalism, what is this strange? It sounds like a niche. And then I said that the first trillionaire will maybe become from the space industry. I was not the first one who said it. The honor to say it first was Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, he said it in 2017. Almost 10 years ago, he predicted the first billionaire in the history of mankind will one who made his money in the space industry. And a lot of people laughed about it because they didn't understand this. And now, of course, everyone can see it's an important topic. And I think tomorrow, this is only the beginning of something I describe in my book. And as you mentioned, the book has 2 parts. The one is about history, to understand how did it happen that the space industry or that space flight became private. This is like the first part. And the other part is what could happen in the future. Topics as asteroid mining, space tourism, even settling Mars. So we can talk about history, we can talk about the future, what will happen. And yes, thank you for inviting me again.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. This will be the biggest IPO of all time, right? I mean, something like $1 trillion. Millionaires will be made. They're putting it out at $135 per share. So it's like a extraordinary event. Maybe we can talk about your own personal history, Rainer, that you kind of had an interest in space, much like kids here in the States or children here in the States who read fictional books and dream of going to the stars and science fiction and things like that. And this is really making science fiction real, right?
Yes, this is true also for me. I think there are a lot of young people, and I was 9 years old when it started that I was fascinated by space. I'm born in 1975, so when I was 12 years old, there was the first moon landing. But even before it started with me, I even edited a newspaper when I was at school at this time, of course. And the newspaper was called in German Galaktische Zeitung. It means something like galactic newspaper. And I sold it to the other students and to my teachers. And I had a lot of books at home about space and a huge map from the moon. And on the wall of my child's room, and a huge poster of the Saturn V rocket. And so it started very early, but to be honest, it was not all the time since decades. I became involved in the space topic again a couple of years ago. And the reason was, when we spoke last time, we spoke about my world travel through 30 countries. And I analyzed what happens if countries add more market in their economy or more government. Maybe you remember we spoke about Vietnam and Poland, for example, two countries that were very, very poor. And when they started with free market reforms, the poverty was reduced, and people are much better off today now. And we spoke about Venezuela, where exactly the opposite happens, where they nationalized private property, and now 80% of the population lives in extreme poverty. The earth fled, 8 million people fled from Venezuela. And so what the difference, what I did now, this time I did not research about a country, but about an industry. And about an industry where everyone thought 20 years ago, this cannot be done by private companies. It's for this, we need the government. It's only possible to do it with the government. And this was correct, of course. It was correct. And the first moon landing was, of course, government-led with a NASA at this time. And then happened something. That is where my book is about. The moon landing was a huge success. But, of course, it cost $30 billion in today's dollars. 300 billion in today's dollars. And 400,000 employees were involved in 20,000 companies, and it took almost 5% of the budget of the United States. And it was like a mobilization, like in wartime, because it was a kind of war. It was a Cold War at this time between the Soviet Union and the United States. And as Lyndon B. Johnson put it at this time, who is first in space is space everywhere, and who is second everywhere. And of course, the United States wanted to be first. So this was a success story. But then I think what is very important in my book, I have a chapter, what happened after the moon landing, after the end of the Apollo program with the space shuttle. And, there were 30 years, there's the space shuttle program. And I analyzed that it was a total disaster, economic disaster. And I analyzed why did it happen, and why and then the final stage was in 2011 when they ended the space shuttle program, and the United States were not longer able to bring their own astronauts from American soil with American rockets to the International Space Station, because after 2 accidents with the space shuttle, 14 people died, 14 astronauts died. After these 2 accidents, then they tried to find a substitute, another rocket, but they were not able. They failed, and they had no possibility. And the chapter title in my book is "The End of the Future," because this was something like the end of the future. And my analysis: why did it happen? Why was it a failure? And what did they do then?
Right. And it was a huge event here in the States, probably globally, but the explosion of Challenger, I think it was kind of like a JFK event. Everybody saw it, and it was kind of like a bookend for this great thing, the space shuttle that is here. Actually, I mean, here in Southern California, there's a huge aerospace industry, and SpaceX is right down the street. Like Elon Musk used to drive around my town, like when SpaceX was a very small. I think he started. It's hard to believe, only 2003, and now it's like going to be one of the biggest company in the world, right? If the IPO works well, but it really was an end of a chapter in space exploration. But what about Elon Musk's innovation differentiated him as somebody from the private sector making innovations as opposed to the public sector? Can you talk about that?
Yes, one thing is that the cooperation between SpaceX and NASA is very different from the cooperation in the 60s or the 70s. Even at this time, the NASA, they didn't build their own rockets. It was built also by private companies like Boeing or Rockwell, but the NASA told them exactly how to do it. It was like a kind of micromanagement, and they had a very strange kind of cooperation. I describe it more in detail in my book. They called the cost plus program. What does it mean? They had to declare, the private companies, how much did it cost for us to build a rocket, and then they could add maybe 8 or 10% profit. This was crazy because it meant that there was an incentive to increase the costs. Because if you have 1 billion cost, you make 100 million. If you have 3 billion cost, you make 300 million. And this is exactly what happened. I spoke with Robert Suprin, who worked at this time for one of the biggest companies in the space industry. And he said, at this time, our best product was our overhead. Because if you have more cost and if you need longer for everything, then you make more money. And this is the kind of, I call it really perverse. Yes. And this is what happened. And so it was very expensive. And the cooperation between Elon Musk's SpaceX and the NASA is completely different. Musk doesn't sell them a rocket, and he produces it exactly the way he wants to produce it. They don't tell him how to produce the rocket, and he doesn't sell them the rocket. What he does, something similar like FedEx or UPS, he sells them a service. I bring your astronauts to the International Space Station, and I charge you this amount of money, fixed price. Or I bring your satellite in orbit, and I charge you fixed price. And when he reduces the cost, it increases profit. It's completely exactly the opposite. The incentive here is to have lower costs, because lower costs means for Musk more profit. And this is what happened. If you compare the launch costs, launch cost means how much does it cost to bring 1 kilogram to space. And if you compare it from the space shuttle to the internal costs of SpaceX today, he reduced the cost per 95%. I repeat it, 95%. And one thing I have more in detail in my book how he did it, but of course one very important thing is that he was the first one to build really reusable rockets. The space shuttle should be reusable, but in reality it was not. There were after every flight 9 months of maintenance, huge maintenance costs. Every flight cost from the space shuttle $1.5 billion, and you know the estimate was 10 million and 10 million, and at the end it was 1.5 billion. So it was crazy, and it was not really reusable. But Musk's rockets are reusable. He used the same rocket today, the Falcon 9, 34 times, and of course this makes a huge difference in price. I will come next month to the United States, to New York and Las Vegas, and if they would throw away the airplane after my flight, I think I would have to pay, don't know, maybe $800,000 for a ticket or something like this. And this is what is really today. Even the NASA, their last, a couple of months ago, they passed the moon, the flyby of the moon. This was the same stupid thing. It cost $4 billion at this time, and the rocket was for one-time use, not reusable. And Elon Musk did it 10 years ago, the first reusable rocket, 10 years ago. And only Jeff Bezos from Amazon founder, he has his own company, Blue Origin. He was also able half year ago to but 10 years later, and no other country, not the Russians, not the Chinese, not the Europeans, also not the United States. And you see, this is incredible. I give you only one number to show how important SpaceX is today in the space industry. Last year, there were 324 rocket launches worldwide, 324. But 165 out of them were SpaceX. So it means if SpaceX were a country, they were number one, far ahead of China, because China had 88 launches. And to compare it with Europe, whole Europe had 8 launches last year, 8. So 5% from this single private company, SpaceX. And this is not the only one. There's another company, Rocket Lab. It's founded by New Zealander Peter Beck. They had 21 rocket launches. So it means also 3 times more than Europe. And this is when people ask me, space capitalism, when will it reality? It sounds like science fiction. I say, no, it's reality today. You see it with a number. So I give you another number: satellites in space, active satellites in space. We have today 15,000, 15, and 10,000 out of them are Starlink satellites from Elon Musk. So this is what happened. And the interesting thing, and you'll find it in my book, is how it started. And maybe I should tell a little bit how it started with Elon Musk, because when he sold his company PayPal, he said there, you can read it in the biography by Isaacson about Musk, and he sat there at a swimming pool reading in an old book about Russian rockets, and he was at the end of the 20s, and a friend of him came to him, or one of his former colleagues, and asked him, hey, what will you do next? So what's the next thing to do? And he said, I think my task is to make mankind a multi-planetary civilization and to settle Mars. And his friend said, you are total banana, you are dude, you are total banana. So everyone laughed at him. And then he started to Google, what about the plans of the NASA for Mars? And he found there's no plan. And then he went on to Google, and he found the Mars Society. I told you before, I'm invited to their a conference in LA in October, and the Mars Society was founded by Robert Suprin. And at this time, Robert Suprin, he invited to a fundraising dinner. You had to pay $500, but Musk transferred 5,000 because at this time people didn't know Musk, who he is, and he thought maybe it will make a difference when I transfer 5,000. And then he spoke with Robert Suprin, and he said, the first thing is, I want to do something to make mankind a multiplanetary species, and he wanted to buy a rocket. And Suprin told him, you can go to Russia. The Russians, they sell rockets. But Musk had no contact to any Russian people who sold rockets. And Suprin gave him the number of someone that I know today. His name is Cantrell, James Cantrell. And Cantrell, he reminded himself when he got a telephone call, when he was driving in his convertible at this time in his car, and he got a telephone call from someone who called himself Elon Musk. And he said, I'm Elon Musk, and I want to make mankind a multiplanetary civilization. I want to buy rockets in Russia. And I got the number from Robert Suprin. And he said, maybe it's crazy. Someone calls him he never heard. And to make a long story short, they met, they went to Russia, Musk and he. And when the Russians asked him, for what do you want to buy the rocket? For what? He repeated again, I want to go settle Mars and make mankind a multiplanetary civilization. And the Russians, they spot on his shoes.
Wow.
And turned around, they spot on his shoes and
Wow.
turned around. They thought it's totally crazy. Do you think he was dressed, like people are dressed in the Silicon Valley, and the Russians, they don't like it. They like with suit and tie and all this. And Cantrell told you before, dress in a different way. They will not like it, the Russians. And Musk, I don't care about it. I will come as ever. And they thought he's crazy. And then on his way back to America in the airplane, he said at his laptop, and he said, oh, I don't think that we have to buy this rockets from the Russians. We can build it by ourselves. And first people were very skeptical. No, it's called rocket science. And it is rocket science. And it was not a success from the beginning. On the opposite, the first 3 flights failed. Rockets exploded, as it happened now a few weeks ago with from Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos. The three first failed, but the fourth one was successful. And I told this story to show the difference, how it started, and then today they have a kind of monopoly. You can say it's a monopoly today. What they have, SpaceX, and what they have done. No government-led space organization could do it.
Right, it's extraordinary what he did. It almost looks like AI when you watch those rockets come back in on re-entry, face down and twist and then turn and land. It is really extraordinary. How could anybody ever think that they could do that other than Musk? It's so incredible. And then that's the margins, right? Because that's reusable. They can internalize those margins, right? SpaceX can, and make it even cheaper. And I think Starlink is a SpaceX company, right? I mean, I believe that is part of this IPO tomorrow.
Yes, of course it is. And yes, you are right about the costs because I spoke about Musk's internal costs. I don't know exactly, but maybe it's something like $1,400 per kilo or something like this. But he charges, of course, his customers, I think 3 times more, because it's not important his internal costs, but the competition, their prices. And this is the basis. And so he makes a huge profit. But in the last 2 years, SpaceX had losses. And yes, I had a discussion with a professor for economics and said, I don't believe in this SpaceX. I saw in the prospectus they had losses, huge losses for 2 years. Well, yes, but what is the reason for the losses? Because he invested $15 billion in the biggest rocket ever built. This is called Starship, and he invested 15 billion in this. So he had losses. But Amazon, Jeff Bezos, he had also the first 7 years he had losses. The first 7 years he made no profit, and but I want to add something. I read the prospectus, the IPO prospectus from SpaceX. It's almost 400 pages, and now all these analysts and so they analyze the numbers, the risks, and everything. But I tell you something: the most important things you will not find in the prospectus. You will find them in my book, New Space Capitalism, and I'll tell you why. These prospectus for IPO are not written by visionary people. They are written by lawyers, and it's all about risk, because it's about liability, and they want as more risks, all the better. Risk. And then they have numbers. I tell you, forget all these numbers. They are not important, not at all, the numbers in the prospectus. Of course, they have to do it according to the law, but forget it. The real important thing is the vision of Musk. And this is something that people don't understand. His vision with now building a city on the moon, later building cities on Mars. Most people think this will cost a lot of money, and even some analysts said he will waste all the money that he earns with Starlink for his science fiction utopia with Mars, and so shareholders will get nothing. But I don't think so, because from these 400 pages, there are only a few lines, maybe a half page, about the real important things in the futures, like we can talk later about it, space tourism or asteroid mining. Because I think the lawyers told them, don't write something about it on liability reasons, and the investors will think this is pure science fiction. So please keep silent about asteroid mining. They will see it as science fiction. Stop. But okay, I don't have to write a prospectus. I can write a book, a scientific book. So I wrote about this, what you don't find in the prospectus. And the biggest thing, if you ask me, could be real estate. Some people wondered why real estate. And this is the most important chapter in my book, is chapter 10. It's about private property. And I have to explain something. There is an international agreement, the Outer Space Treaty from 1967. And according to this Outer Space Treaty, it's prohibited for states to claim ownership over celestial bodies, or to claim ownership or land of celestial bodies. So it's forbidden. No property at all. It belongs to all mankind. For me, it sounds like a socialist idea. It belongs to everyone, and in the end, it belongs to no one. But this is the Outer Space Treaty from 1967. But there's nothing in this agreement how it is with private people. How's it with companies? Because at this time in the 60s, no one could imagine that 60 years later, there will be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or billionaires like this who are able to go there on their own risk. And so it's silent. There's nothing about it. And there's a dispute among legal scholars whether it's possible to claim ownership for a private person and for a company. And I think if Musk goes to Mars, I think he will do this. He will claim ownership. I don't think the whole planet, not this, but manageable area. Let's give an example, maybe the size of Singapore. Mars, the surface of Mars is 200,000 times bigger than Singapore. So there's enough for others. And why do I think so? I'm an historian, and I read a lot about the settlement of the American West, how it happened.
Exactly what I was thinking about.
Yes,
is what trains did, what the Transcontinental Railroad did to money. Land values, yeah.
And there was the squatters. And of course, we know later on it was legalized by the Homestead Act and laws. But this was not the first thing. The first thing was settlers, squatters. They claimed ownership of land. They built something there. And only later on it was legalized. And I think in space, it will happen exactly the same way. I think what we need is space quarters. I call them space quarters. People who go to Mars or to asteroids, and then they claim ownership. And then he could bring it to the stock exchange. For example, bring an asteroid to the stock exchange. And then you and I and everyone can buy shares and have a small bit of the asteroid, for example, or small bit of Mars. And I think this is the real story. What we saw there, it's the biggest the biggest mountain in our solar system on Mars. It's 3 times bigger than Mount Everest. You have it on Mars.
I don't know how to pause this SpaceX video, but it's on there. You can just go to the SpaceX website, guys.
It's great. Yes, it's
but
great.
They're really forward thinking. Like, they're thinking Mars. Like, this is how you get people's imagination fired up for some eventuality. Like, you seed the consciousness of with these ideas. But it's like that. What happened is like nobody thought about like the Wild West back in the day in the US. And then they built the Transcontinental Railroad. And then the earliest guys who were involved were the guys who made the money. So the government just allowed them. Like, there could be government grants for the exploration and settlement of Mars that would allow private enterprise to do it. Because that's what happened in the US. My understanding is Congress gave these guys to build the Continental Railroad a mile each way so they could build the railroad through it, but then they kept that mile path. And that's how all those guys, Stanford, Fairmont, Crocker, there's one other guy I can't remember, but they were like the early railroad barons. People thought they made money off the railroads. They did, but the real money was the land values going from pricing at zero to being entry points to the railroads for trade, cattle, grain, all kinds of transport stuff. Yeah, so something like that could happen. Like it could build like that in Mars. Yeah,
absolutely. Maybe I think you have seen, and maybe also our listeners, this movie Once Upon a Time in the West. Have you seen it with Charles Bronson and Claudia Cardinale and Henry Ford? And there was, maybe you remember, this guy, this farmer from Ireland who bought a piece of land in the desert. And everyone called him, he's crazy, this idiot. Why did he buy it? But he knew the railroad will come and it will increase in worth, in value. And this is exactly what will happen in the moment when someone claims private property on Mars and try to sell it. People will buy it even before something happens there. Visionary people who hope that it will increase in value. And so I think it depends everything on the private property, because if you ask the question, why aren't we on Mars today? Why aren't we on asteroids? It's 55 years ago that we were on the moon. And after this, with the manned spaceflight, almost nothing happened. And I give an answer in my book. Why is that? Because you need always incentives. To do something, everyone has to have a reason. Nothing is done without a huge reason. And it's especially not something that costs so much billions and billions and billions of dollars. And they had a reason in the 60s with the Cold War to show America's first. But then in the moment when they planted the flag on the moon, the wind was out of the sails. the wind was out of the sails at this time. And I think the missing incentives is private property. If it would be possible to bring asteroids to the stock exchange, or part of Mars, bring Mars to the stock exchange, yes, and this time there's an economic reason. And the saying is, money makes the world go round, and this is also true for space. And Musk said he want to settle 1 million people on Mars. Of course, it sounds like science fiction, and I think it is really science fiction if you don't find a way to finance it. And of course, it can't be financed by taxpayers' money. Maybe one flight to the Mars, yes, of course, but not to settle 1 million people on Mars. You have to find a way to finance it. And I think the best thing is go there, claim ownership of of a part of Mars, bring it to the stock exchange, and make money this way. My goal is, I know a lot of people who are very close to Elon Musk, who know him well. But to be honest, I haven't met him in person. I know from other people, but I want to meet with him and discuss this idea, because I made my money in the real estate industry. So I'm a combination of historian on the one hand and the real estate investor on the other hand. And so I see it with the lens of a real estate man. How can you make money? And I think this is the missing link, that make it a real estate story. I don't know whether he ever thought about it, maybe, but I think these are the hidden stories in SpaceX, and not the numbers. How do they make money today? And all this, what you find in the prospectus. This is not the real important things.
I don't think people can imagine what they're doing. If they're building 1,000 starships per year, think about the kind of income they would just have from a tourist. Everybody wants to go up into space. Isn't Bezos's Blue Star or something? It's just sending kind of like wealthy people up into orbit for a while. I mean,
yes.
It's a huge market for that. That's a huge, especially if you have a reusable rocket.
Of course, today you have to be really, really rich and wealthy to pay. There are two versions: the cheap version to go some minutes in orbit. Cheap version means something like $300,000 or $400,000, and then there's the more expensive version to go to the International Space Station for a couple of days. What is like 40 million. And of course, you have to be a billionaire to afford it. And one man who did it was Jared Isaacman. He's a friend of Elon Musk, and he was a space tourist. He's a billionaire, and he did it. And now today he became the new CEO of NASA. So but he started as a space tourist. And of course, today it's only for rich people. But think the beginning of aviation. It was the same thing. It was only for very, very rich people. Ordinary people couldn't afford it. Or even with cars, before Henry Ford came and made mass production.
Steamships or shipping or the Titanic or that era. There were higher levels.
Another good example, with everything, even with a toilet that today almost everyone had. This was luxury.
Televisions,
TV, luxury.
Radio,
Yes, it's always in the beginning. You need rich people who can finance it in the way that the high development costs, and later on it will become a product for more people. And this will happen, I think, the younger ones who are now in their 20s or 30s, I think for them it will be maybe make your honeymoon 3 days going to the moon or something like this.
Sorry to interrupt, Rainer, but what's the speculation of using a starship to get to the moon? What are they saying that the time frame is from a launch from the U.S. or the launch from Starship or Starbase to get to the moon? How long would that take, do you think? What are they speculating?
It has to happen in the next few years, even in 2 years or so, because there's now a competition between the Chinese. I have one chapter in my book about China, and China, they said we will go to the moon before 2030. Before 2030. So it's not much time. To be honest, I don't think so much about it to beat the Chinese there and going to moon. NASA does it now, and Elon Musk, but I think the United States were there even 1969, so let them go there second 55 years later. I wouldn't care about it. Let's go to Mars. This would be my priority. But I think the NASA people, they think different, and they make now the priority. They don't want the Chinese to go there first, and so I think they will do it in the next 2 or 3 years to go to the moon, and then, but not as they did it before, to go there, plant a flag, and then go back, but to build a small city on the moon. This is the next thing. And there are a lot of other plans. I have it in my book. For example, data centers in Earth, data center in space. This is a huge story. Elon Musk, I told you he owns 10,000 Starlink satellites, but in January, he applied for 1 million more satellites because he want to build data centers in Earth, because he says we have sun all around 24 hours, not as it is on Earth, day and night, and no clouds and nothing. And it's much more efficient if you have them in orbit, also with cooling. You don't need water. It's very cold there in space. So it's not simple to do it. And he's not the only one. Google works on this topic. Then another company, Planet Labs, works on this topic. NVIDIA works on this topic. But this is also one of the next stories. So this is why I have my book, New Space Capitalism, because people have to understand that this is something starting a complete new era. But my argument is the missing link is the property thing. If you want to settle 1 million people on Mars, how should they live there without private property? This would mean socialism, and socialism worked nowhere. It didn't work in the Soviet Union. It didn't work in East Germany. It didn't work in Cuba or North Korea. Why should it work on Mars? This is crazy. It did not work on Earth, and of course it will not work on Mars. So we need private property, and I think this is so important. And you said Newt Gingrich wrote the preface to my book, and he's on the same page. He says, yes, without private property, it will not work. And this is my goal, what I want to do with my book, to start a discussion. We need private property, because if we don't do it, and China is there first on Mars, maybe they will, of course, they signed the Outer Space Treaty, but you can cancel them with 1 year notice, and maybe they cancel it, and then they say, okay, Mars belongs now to China, the People's Republic of China. And I think we don't want this. And so we should really go on and make Mars to our priority and make private property to our priority.
Right. I mean, I think it would just release all the incentives. The kind of capitalistic, private property incentive brings people in and creates an economy, or magnifies economic activity, because people see opportunity and independence and sovereignty. And I mean, I could see that happening sometime if they could pull it off. Like what Elon Musk has already pulled off is really extraordinary. Like Starlink, it really works. Like you can use it on a plane. Like it's incredible. Nothing like, I mean, I'm somebody who grew up before the internet, so I remember VHS tapes and things like that. So the magnification, or Moore's law of technology applied to technology, is happening. As long as somebody's putting money into it, like SpaceX, things will only magnify and get better. Just like when he started Tesla with like one little tiny electric car, So this kind of growth is really important. And I think people could perceive themselves, like you talked about your book that you wrote, like Galactic Paper or whatever. Could be a new man, like a Homo Galacticus, not like Homo erectus or whatever they're saying, Homo sapien. I mean, it's really not outside of the realm of possibility, because there's enough. That'd be the new adventure, the final frontier, right? Like just like Star Trek. Did Star Trek ever take off in Germany and Deutschland?
Yes, also
Okay.
there were a lot of fans. To be honest, I was more, there was a German science fiction, and I was more than this. But also there were a lot of Star Trek fans in Germany. And you know what is science fiction today? In a lot of cases, it became reality in the futures. If you analyze the science fiction authors like Jules Verne or all this, yes, of course, it didn't happen exactly the way they predicted it, but it happened sooner or later. And what I like with the SpaceX and Elon Musk is another thing. I think it's a part of the, like I see America, like I see the United States. Maybe today, sometimes we thought it isn't as it was before, because it was what I think like thinking big. You know, I'm a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Maybe you saw his movie on Netflix about his life. And in this movie, he says, this is the American idea. Think big. It couldn't be big enough. Yes. And what could be bigger than the idea of settling Mars, for example? I think it's bigger than everything else. And this is also what things that changed history. Visionary people like Henry Ford or Thomas Edison. And for me, Elon Musk is one of them, really visionary people. And so I can't, of course, and I will not do it, say something about the valuation now of SpaceX, or whether you should buy shares or not. Even, as someone writing about it, I don't recommend anything. But I can say one thing: if you want to understand these stories, it's better to read my book than to read the IPO prospectus, because this prospectus is written by lawyers.
Right. It's a legal document. So
it's a legal thing.
That's really like, it's dangerous. This is dangerous. We're not making any financial advice to anybody, too, not you or me. So just like a disclaimer, do not consider this episode any provision of financial advice.
And even a big, great company could be too expensive. This is if you say one thing is a great company and the other thing is how much do you have to pay. The only thing that I want to say is that the really important things are not in the prospectus. They are in my book. That is really clear. They can't write it there because, yes, it's a liability. And of course, there are risks. So one risk, you have a lot of this in the prospectus, is Elon Musk. So the key person risk, if he gets a heart attack, what we don't hope next year, or something happens with him, what will happen with SpaceX? We don't know. But on the other hand, we thought the same thing about Apple, with Steve Jobs at this time. What will happen when he passed away? But he passed away, and it's still a great, great company. Or Microsoft. Bill Gates is alive, but for a long time he's not involved in the business of Microsoft, because he does his own foundation, philanthropic things, and is not longer involved since I don't know how long, 20 years or so in Microsoft. But it's still a great company. So sometimes, of course, it depends a lot about one person. It seems so that today it depends a lot about Musk, but we don't know it. We will find out, and hopefully he's alive for a long time. But of course, these are risks. There are a lot of risks, but there are also a lot of opportunities.
Right, a lot of rewards. Right. The guy you mentioned, whose name I wasn't familiar with, was Hans Dominic. So that was kind of your Jules Verne kind of German. The other thing is, what's interesting too about Germany is how much Germans like the Wild West or cowboys and Indian stories. I find that kind of interesting. We're pretty far away from you guys, but the cowboy story seems to have captured the imaginations of a lot of people in Europe generally. I guess is really true. I guess the spaghetti westerns and all that stuff. Ranier, I know that you have limited time. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, the Mars Society event is happening. You're
Yes,
giving a
I hope
presentation, right?
go there to the Mars Society. I will be there in October. I would be happy to meet you. And if you
Yeah.
want to meet me before, go to Freedom Fest. This is now in July, 8th of July in Las Vegas. I'll be there every year. It's a great thing. I meet every year my friend Steve Forbes, for example. He's there every year. And a lot of people, and they show a lot of films there, libertarian films and freedom-minded, liberty-minded people there. It's organized by Mark Skousen, a great economist. And go there on the website of Freedom Fest if you will meet me. And of course, I'd be happy if you read my book, and especially I think give it to younger people. If you have children, for example, and they don't know what to do or what to study, then stop studying law or economy. And if you study law, then study space law maybe or something. But go in space. Yes, this is something that has a future for young people. Yes, this is the Freedom Fest event. I really like it.
Yeah, this is a great place for libertarians. I mean, it seems like it's a newer trend in the United States was moving towards more independent thought instead of the kind of binary political system. There's a lot more independence, it seems.
I think it's really necessary. To be honest, I don't want to talk too much about politics, but in the first term of Donald Trump, I thought, okay, maybe 50% is good, like law and taxes deregulation. Other things I didn't like with this, for example, tariff is the most beautiful word in the English dictionary. I don't believe in it. It's the same as if you would say taxes is the beautiful word in the dictionary. But now, to be honest, I'm kind of frustrated what happens now in the second term. And on the other hand, if you see on the Democrats with the crazy leftist here from Uganda, Marxist in New York, who became the mayor of New York.
Mamdani, yeah.
Yeah, Mamdani. And, this is also something. I wrote a book in 2018 about, the title is The Power of Capitalism. And I warned about anti-capitalist. And people said to me, this is a fight. This is nonsense. There's no one pro-socialism, and everyone knows that capitalism is better. Why do you write a book like this? You fight these fights from the 80s or from the Cold War. And this was how people criticized me. And now, unfortunately, I was right, because 8 years later, in the main world capital of capitalism, they voted for hardcore Marxist as their mayor. And so I think it's so crazy. And it's
crazy. It's super crazy. New York was like the center hub at one point for capitalism globally.
Yes.
With the rise of the United States after World War II. And now it's just like nobody wants to invest there. They're fleeing there like California. It
would be the same as if in China today they would vote. Of course, they can't vote for Ayn Rand or something like this.
Right.
Yes?
No, it's
Ayn Rand president of China or something. Yes, but we have also good hope. I like not only people like Mas. I also like very much Javier Milei in Argentina. I think they are friends, and I think these ideas of liberty, I hope that you're right, that they will become stronger, because this new space capitalism, my book is only an example. What happens if you give more freedom, more liberty, more market? Progress happens in a way as no one could imagine. Of course, not every space company succeeds, as anyway, no, not every new startup succeeds. On the contrary, most of them fail. But this is the beautiful thing with capitalism. It's like the survival of the fittest, and a lot of fail, but then there you have some of these great companies, and
very creative, bring things to people who have tangible outcomes that benefit individuals. And I think your analogy of the of the rise of the West, or the transcontinental railroad. Because once that railroad hit Sacramento, it brought so much investment, so many changes. Stanford University is an outgrowth of that. I mean, all these other places and the growth of San Francisco and all that all came, well, from the 49ers too, the gold rush, but also just the involvement of individuals coming together to start industries and really populate the West. There was really not much. I mean, there were natives and indigenous, but there really wasn't much in California, maybe till after the turn of the century. But look at the growth. It's incredible what this kind of open land gave to people an opportunity. And so many things came out here because of that possibility. There would be no Silicon Valley, and there would be no kind of Hollywood. Maybe no Hollywood would be okay, but there would be no Silicon Valley or Elon Musk without stuff that happened 150 years ago. So maybe you're seeing the seeds with this new space capitalism of something 150 years of now that could be like a new California. And I'm not exaggerating. I don't say that lightly. What do you think about that?
Yes, maybe we don't know, but I think it's only the beginning, and it's great. I read today in the newspaper. To be honest, I didn't know it. Tomorrow we have maybe 4,000 new millionaires in the United States, and why is that? Because there are a lot of SpaceX employees who has shares in the company, even ordinary employees, and they said it's up to 4,000 more millionaires today. SpaceX people, this one billionaire, but a lot of millionaires. And some people told me, "Oh, it's so bad. We have now a trillionaire, and we don't need, this Bernie Sanders. We don't want any billionaires, and of course, no trillionaire." You had this protest there at the Nasdaq, no trillionaires. But I say you something, there are countries without trillionaires. If you look at the Forbes list, of the richest people, there's also a list how many billionaires are in every country. And there are some countries without billionaires, like Cuba, North Korea, or some very poor African countries. But on the other hand, there are countries with a lot of billionaires. For example, a lot of people don't know it. Sweden. Sweden has more billionaires than the United States, adjusted to the population, of course, not absolute. Switzerland has much more billionaires than the United States, adjusted to the population. And then I ask people, it's so simple. Think, where would you prefer to live? In these countries without billionaires, like Cuba, North Korea, or this poor African countries, or better, Sweden and Switzerland? Where do you prefer to live? I think we need even more millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, because it's a matter of fact, the more billionaires you have, the less poverty you have. China is one example. In the 60s, in the 70s, there were not a single billionaire in China, but 88% lived in extreme poverty. Even in the end of the 50s and the beginning of the 60s, 45 million people died in China as a result of the biggest socialist experiment. And today, you have so many billionaires in China, only the United States has more than in China. And the number of people living in poverty was reduced dramatically in China. And
they brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty.
Yes, and these are two sides of the same coin. And this is what these people with a zero-sum mindset, what they don't understand. They think people become rich because they took it away from the poor. They think Elon Musk became rich because he stole it from it. But no, this is magic thinking. He didn't steal it. And this is something that these anti-capitalists don't understand.
They're just not creative. Bernie Sanders, to me, is really one of the greatest capitalists out there, actually. He's really enriched himself off the state. He has 3 homes. He drives a Ferrari. He has great health care. He has set fees. Like, he'll get 90% of his income for the rest of his life. Like, he's done really well for himself. So it's all it's all just fake, concepts for him. He's not poor at all. He's made money off the state, so it's kind of rich to see him. He's probably one of the biggest, in my opinion, biggest grifter in the United States history. And he keeps whining in public because it plays with people who may not be as well off. But think about all the people that Elon Musk life has enriched. You said they're gaining 4,000 new millionaires. Think of all those people with that wealth and money who can have families and have no mortgages and all this other stuff. And it really does. It's like dropping a pebble in a pond, and those ripples go all the way through society. And it's not just about wealth, it's about cultural wealth, it's about advancement in products that are beneficial to humanity, much like the train or the radio or the TV. These technologies have benefited people. They can be used for bad too, but they really have allowed people to travel and to communicate and things like that. So some of these arguments from the left are annoying. And Mandani's like, it's regressive. Like, they call themselves progressive, but they're regressing into like a third world state in some of these states. It's incredible.
In the end, I don't know. Please double check it. Maybe in the beginning I made a mistake. This is because English is not my mother language. I don't know whether you know it. In Germany, we have another word for trillionaire, and the word for trillionaire in Germany is billionaire. It's a little bit funny. So when I mean tomorrow we have the first trillionaire, but if you say it in German, you say the first billionaire, because 1 trillion means in German language 1 billion. So maybe I made a mistake in the beginning. I don't know, but of course I'm talking about a trillionaire.
Trillion in American dollars, right?
Trillionaire is the American, but in Germany we say billion. It's what is in the United States 1 trillion is in Germany 1 billion. So because we have another word. So apologize if I made maybe at the beginning. I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't recall that.
If I made a mistake, apologize. No, it was great to talk to you. Hopefully people order my book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever. Give it to young people, give it to students, give it to your children. Maybe they will be fascinated by these ideas as I was as a child. Maybe they will study something with space, not some bullshit thing like gender studies or things like this. No, study something with space, because this is the future.
It sure is. You think about 1,000 starships, how many people it's going to take to maintain or design or develop or pilot, or who knows. There's just so much on the horizon, guys, that could be exciting for your future career in aerospace or something like that. Again, the full title of Ranier's book is Space Capitalism, The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. He mentioned Amazon. You can get the book in Kindle. You can get an audiobook. You can get a hardcover as well. So it's out now. I think it was released in the States.
It was released yesterday.
Yesterday. So released just June. So the timing is just superb. Like, you couldn't. I don't know if you planned it, but it's a great job planning or unplanned.
Yes, incredible. First, to be honest, I want to do it with another publisher, and he told me we can only have it in September. And I said no. I think it was month ago. I think the SpaceX thing will happen in June. This is what I feel. So and so I'm against September. Then I spoke with Skyhorse, and I told them I will do it with you, but only if you're able to publish it in June, because I believe the SpaceX IPO will happen in June, and it's of course good timing. Published yesterday, and tomorrow is the SpaceX IPO. So hopefully, it's absolutely up to date what you read in the book.
Amazing. And another great book by Skyhorse. Is there anything you'd like to add, Ranier, or anything I missed before we wrap up?
The only thing I want to add, thank you a lot, and apologize for my English, that sometimes I have difficulty to explain everything because it's not my mother language. But I really appreciate that you invited me for a second time, and I'm looking very much forward to talk to you next time.
Likewise. Again, guys, you'll see Ranier, and check this out. This is a great place to go. Freedom Fest 2026, Las Vegas. A lot of important figures. I think I saw Rand Paul in there, some other people like that. So you could check out a network, probably a great place to network. And then also coming up in October, where I think Ranier's on the speakers list, which I couldn't find on the website, but it's the 2026 Mars Society International Convention here in LA at USC, so close to downtown LA. And that's from October 22nd to the 24th. So get it on the ground floor, man. This is like seedling of the future here, guys. If you have a child or something like that who loves space, like Ranier did, or me, I had my own Apollo 11 rocket that I played with when I was, 8 or 9.
What's your age, by the way? How old are
I'm
you?
57.
Okay,
I was born in 68. So like that was kind of my era, the space era or whatever. So, but yeah, check out for these. And again, one last time, I will say the title of the book, which is now available on Amazon, is New Space Capitalism: The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. And it's Dr. Ranier Zitelmannn, Zitelmann. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
You as well. Stay there.
Thank
Stay
you.
there. Don't run off. Don't run off.